Okay, all right. So, another video at you today. Today, what we're gonna do is we're gonna be looking at a TikTok video, and then also a response to the same video. But so TikTok is great for some memes, jokes, pranks, whatever. There's a lot of really good and really funny stuff on TikTok. But another part of the app, there's a lot of relationship advice and dating advice and all kinds of stuff like that, and discussions and questions around that of gender roles and all this kind of stuff. So today we're going to be looking at a video where the creator poses a question, and it's a fine question. There's really nothing wrong with asking, but the issue that I take with it is there's a lot of assumptions baked into the question and a lot of qualifiers with the way that they ask it. There's you'll see in a minute. There's this whole list of things that they give for like I said, like qualifiers, things that you have to meet or criteria that you have to meet in order to answer the question. And while that's fine, I don't think it produces a good discussion because there's a lot baked into that, and there's a lot of assumptions you have to make and kind of things you have to grant them in order to come up with an answer that would be like considered acceptable. Because there's a lot of things you have to go through and a lot. This isn't a simple yes/no question. Like there's just a lot more in there. And I think the problem is the way that they pose the question is as a yes/no question. But we're going to watch it now, and I'll pause during certain sections and kind of comment on it of the parts where I don't think it lines up correctly or it doesn't really give a good, doesn't really give a good argument. But yeah, so let's get into it, and we'll see. You'll kind of see what I'm talking about.
I have a serious question. Do you think it's possible for a woman to remain fully expanded, taking up all her space?
We'll stop there. So first thing, she said, is it possible for a woman to remain fully expanded and take up all of her space? So those don't really have any meaning behind them, right? Like, what do you don't, they don't go into any detail as to what you mean when you say remain fully expanded and take up all of her space. So fully expanded, I mean, I'm assuming they mean like metaphysically expanded. I don't know, like emotionally and all that kind of stuff. I guess you could say that. Okay, you could say that. I guess that from that part. But to say fully expanded and taking up all of her space, that doesn't really give any sort of like that doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't really mean much, right? Like you're going to ask this question. You're saying, here's a question. So can a woman remain fully expanded, taking up all of her space? Like that doesn't. You have to explain it. Like that's an entire another video. Just explain what you mean by that. Well, let's go on.
Have all her needs met. None of her needs are compromised. And
Okay, needs met and none of her needs compromised. So those are two things. The problem is, so that I kind of gave it away in the beginning, but this is a question about relationships, and she's burying the lead on this. She's starting out giving a bunch of requirements and a bunch of things like, oh, fully expanded, have all her needs met, this, that, and the other. But then but they're burying the lead. They're not saying what this is going to be about. So you're already kind of primed. It's starting off very loaded, right? But yeah, having all of their needs met. So yeah, again, it doesn't mention what kind of needs. These emotional needs, are these physical needs? Like, I mean, because needs can be anything, right? Like, obviously, food is a need, right? So, are you talking about like the need to eat? Somebody who perhaps is in a wheelchair obviously has different needs in terms of like mobility needs, or there's a lot you could say here and a lot you go into. I'm going to have to assume emotional needs. Like I said before, like you have to grant them a lot. You have to grant them, okay, it's probably emotional needs or whatever. So let's keep going.
none of her boundaries are compromised or infringed upon at all. She remains completely and totally herself, keeps all.
Okay. Emotional boundaries infringed upon or compromised. That's a huge one. There's a lot kind of built into that one. Because again, the lead is being buried. This is about relationships. So to say that your needs, boundaries and needs and all that kind of stuff, yeah, obviously, like everyone has their own boundaries, and certain boundaries, yeah, you can infringe on them, or you can respect them and whatever. But again, that's just an entirely different conversation. So let's go on. We'll play to the end, and then we'll kind of give our final thoughts.
all of her light in a heterosexual monogamous relationship with a cishet man? Debate in the comments. I have a
Okay, so here's where, again, so this is finally the lead, right? Okay, it's about relationships. So basically, so the question boils down to, can a woman be completely herself and have all of her own emotional boundaries and not, have all of her boundaries set up, and basically not have to compromise on anything in a relationship, right? If I had to boil this down to a very simple question, is, can a woman be in a relationship with a cisgendered heterosexual man, and monogamous relationship? She also include monogamous. We'll get to that in a second. And saying, okay, so you're going to be in this relationship with a cisgendered heterosexual man in this monogamous relationship, right? And then can this woman exist in this relationship and not have any compromise and not compromise at all? And that's the question, right? A yes or no question. This is not a yes or no question, right? Like, now, I comment, because she posed it as a yes or no question. Like, I commented on. We'll take a look at my comments in a minute. Like I commented, 100% possible, no debate, right? Because it's true. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's obviously, yes, you can exist that way. But again, a lot of things baked into this, a lot of assumptions being made. So first of all, there's a lot of issues with it. Can they be happy or can they exist in these relationships and with no compromise? And what was strange is that they qualified and said a heterosexual monogamous relationship with a cisgendered heterosexual man. There's a lot baked into that. Okay, so are you saying, are you saying that it would be different if it was a bisexual man, or if the woman herself was bisexual, or if there was anything, so there's, like I said, there's a lot of, like, that's super, super specific, but neither here nor there. We'll get into that. So yes, I think 100% you can exist as it, because that's the way that the relationship goes, right? If you're, everyone in a relationship has boundaries that they set up, things that they're willing to deal with and things they're not willing to deal with. And yeah, what you look for in a partner is obviously somebody who respects those boundaries. And if you have someone that doesn't respect those boundaries, then you have to make that decision of, okay, do I stay with this person, or no, are these boundaries way too important to me and I have to leave them? And that's kind of what you have to deal with. But let's get into the response, because the response goes into more, because the problem that I have with the video, I don't know, the biggest problem I have with it is, other than just this generic question being posed, there's no conclusion, there's no reasoning behind it, there's no explanation, there's nothing. Now, the comments, of course, all talk about whatever, all their nonsense, but there's one comment that I clued into, and it's this person says, relationships are about compromise on both sides. Every relationship, we are all unique. Communication is necessary. 100% agree with this person. 100% true. Any kind of relationship you are being in, whether this is a romantic relationship or a relationship that you have with your friends, you're going to compromise, okay, all the time. It doesn't mean that the relationship is toxic. It doesn't mean that there's a bad thing going on, right? Okay, the other day, I went to my friend's house for dinner, okay? That was a compromise if we really want to get into it, because I had to leave my house, right? Now, maybe I didn't feel like leaving my house that day, but my friend invited me and I was like, well, I like hanging out with them, so yeah, I might as well go over there, right? I made that compromise. I said to myself, hey, you know what? I really don't feel like leaving the house today. Maybe I don't want to leave my house, but I'm willing to, because I know what kind of benefit or what I'm looking for when I get there. So yeah, but does that mean that friendship is toxic because I had to compromise my personal want to leave the house that day, or not? No. Sometimes compromises and things just happen with normal everyday interactions, and they're not bad. This is just part of life and living. So her response to this question was, y'all need to take your rose-colored glasses off so we can have a real conversation. First of all, that's antagonistic. Telling someone they need to take their rose-colored glasses off, whatever, obviously is that, like, oh, you're basically, what that's telling this person is you had a bad relationship and you just didn't know it, which I think is wrong. But here's the response that they gave. Let's go into that and we'll see, because at least in the response, they give more of their opinion, and you can kind of see where they're coming from.
So some of you really missed the point of the video and tried to level the playing field and be like, all relationships require compromise.
So yeah, well, first of all, it was like one person, because if you read most of those comments, all of those comments are like, nope, impossible, women can never be happy, they can never exist in this kind of relationship, whatever. So no, only like one comment said that, but whatever. So relationships are about compromise, and she was saying that all relationships don't require compromise because they called it leveling the playing field, which again kind of leads into their opinion. Here we
That's
go.
not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about healthy compromise where you both decide to agree on something. I'm speaking about the way women naturally have a much deeper emotional capacity and much stronger emotional intelligence.
Okay, so sure, stereotypically, that is often talked about. That women are more emotional, they feel more emotions, whatever, or they have more, I guess what they were saying, emotional intelligence. Now, stereotypically, that's true, but that doesn't mean that men can't have any of that. That doesn't mean that you can't have an emotionally deep man or someone who has a man with high emotional intelligence. So, yes, you're basing your whole thing off of stereotypes. Move on.
And their boundaries, their meaning women, our boundaries are so easily invaded upon because the nature of a man in this society, and it's not even an individual's fault, it's the society's fault, is that man is synonymous in this society with conquer and invade and take.
No, not at all. I want to be more charitable, but I can't because you're saying that oh, in this society, men are conquerors and takers and invaders. First of all, that's nothing to do with a relationship. That is so stereotyped and so cherry picking a very particular type of person and then applying that to everybody. That's applying taking one specific type of individual and then saying, okay, guess what? Society does this, so therefore all men are like this, and this is how a relationship is. And that's not the case at all. And she was like, oh, I'm not talking about healthy compromise. That's 100% a cop out, in my opinion, because you said in your previous video, you didn't say healthy compromise. You didn't give that as a qualifier. You gave a whole bunch of other qualifiers of how a woman just couldn't have all of these things, when in fact, like, she kind of can. So I'll finish it out.
And women, a woman in this society values women who are selfless, who are martyrs, and who give and give and give and give and don't ask for anything.
Society values everyone that does that. It is very, very common for anyone, doesn't matter what your gender is or your identity, doesn't matter, but people who are selfless and people who help others and give whatever and all that kind of stuff are always valued in society. I don't think there's ever a time in which somebody is not valued for that. You'd have to be you would have to be very, very specific and point out cases where somebody who acted in a selfless manner wasn't praised or wasn't considered to be a good person. So I don't understand why they are attributing that trait and that treatment to only women.
So I'm not sure why we're pretending that we're on a level playing field of, oh, relationships, everybody requires compromise. We know where we are. We know what we live in. Why do we pretend? I don't understand why people pretend. My question was more about with the way women have been taught to behave and the way men have been taught to behave. How is a woman in a heterosexual, monogamous relationship with a cis?
Now, here's it again. You're saying that, oh, the way women have been taught and the way men have been taught. Again, gross stereotyping and generalizations for something that is not necessarily true all the time, but you are acting in this case as if it is true all the time. Rather than trying to say, rather than focusing on the specific and saying, I want to talk about compromise in relationships or emotional boundaries, you're applying it and saying, well, in my question, I asked about emotional boundaries and all that, but now I'm going to talk about compromise, and I'm not going to talk about first of all, I'm not going to define what I think a healthy compromise is, which you should, because you said, oh, I'm talking about healthy compromise. We both decide whatever, we don't have to. And again, brings the, how is a woman in a heterosexual, how is a woman in this heterosexual monogamous relationship going to function? So again, you're adding all of these things and you're saying that a lot of these things are hinged on, oh, the only type of person that experiences this is in this type of relationship. So now I have to, this kind of, I guess this gets to like begging the question, right? Because now I have to ask, I say, okay, so what about a woman in a non-heterosexual relationship, right? What about a woman in a non-monogamous relationship, whether it's non-monogamy, polyamory, or whatever? So therefore, intrinsically, is a monogamous relationship bad now? Or is a monogamous relationship with a man bad because this man is trained, taught by society that they're going to, um, that they're going to have to compromise because that's the way society treats men? Or is a non-monogamous relationship any different, right? So if you have a woman who's in say a polyamorous relationship with two men, two cisgendered heterosexual men, is that automatically going to be a different kind of relationship? Is that automatically not going to infringe upon this woman's boundaries? Or is it still going to be the same? So it's just, again, there are so many things, so many qualifiers, so many things baked into it, so much, like, well, now I have to ask this question, right? Like, because we were saying a woman and a heterosexual man. Okay, now I have to ask the question, what about two women? Or what about, a polyamorous relationship? And because does it still apply to all of this stuff? And again, these would be way more specific questions that I think is where the value in this is you want to narrow it down and be specific.
Man going to get her needs met when she has been taught to give away her needs and take as much pain as she can, and that's what makes her a good woman. And the man has been taught to take without asking. That was the point of the video.
So that wasn't the point of your video because you didn't say that, right? Like, again, maybe I'm being too mean, but like, if the point of your video is, hey, I have to use this whole other video to explain this entire point and talk about how what I think men in society have been taught and what I think women in society have been taught and all this stuff, that's not what your question was. Your question was, hey, can women exist in these kinds of relationships and be happy and not have to compromise? This is also, like, it's what I'm saying. Like, in order to do that, that's not the point of your video. Then, if I couldn't get that from your original video, then clearly you just weren't very clear. And what I think this stems from is the lack of any kind of conclusion in that first video. That just, hey, here's a question, discuss in the comments. And then when people leave comments and do exactly what you asked them to do, you have to say, no, you're wrong. Oh, hold on, we can't have this conversation yet because your rose-colored glasses are on, because there's this not... Now, if you want to talk about... She talks about level playing field. If you want to talk about a level playing field, if you want to talk about the differences between men and women in a society, then yeah, that's great. Have that conversation. But don't shame or put down somebody by being like, whoa, why are you acting like we're on a level playing field and this and that? Like, why are you doing that? Like, why are you being antagonistic towards a person who did exactly what you asked them to, which was to have a discussion and give your opinion? So, but anyway, my take on the whole thing is, if you're going to do something like this, if you're going to say, oh, I want to ask this question, or I want to start this conversation, then actually do that. Give your opinion, give something that you give a take, give something, and then go from there. And don't take comments and what people say and antagonize them and say, well, you just have these rose-colored glasses on. Like, we can't take your opinion seriously. This isn't a real conversation. Like, get out of here. You asked for opinions. You asked for people to discuss it. They're going to discuss it. You're saying this in a public forum. But yeah, and the relationship advice is, again, there's also no conclusion. Again, even in this video, there's no conclusion, right? Because she still goes on to say, like, well, we're not even on a level playing field, so we can't even talk about that. Women have to compromise because society has taught them to. No, it hasn't. Maybe 20 years ago, sure. But I don't think today, and the way that we talk about relationships and differences and like gender roles and differences between men and women and all that, I don't think that's still true. Like, yes, are there people who do still believe that? Sure. But I don't think that is the overwhelming majority of the way that people look at relationships and dating. Okay, we can even look at statistics. Most people still get into relationships for love and companionship, and like romance, I think, are like the top three. So obviously emotional needs are being met if you fall in love with someone, right? And if that's still the number one thing that people get into relationships for, then obviously, like, it's not true that people are compromising all over the place. But yes, point being, healthy relationships do involve compromise. Sometimes you have to do them, but you yourself have to set those boundaries and determine what you're okay with. And sometimes you are okay with compromising on certain things, and that's healthy. That's not bad. That's not wrong. That doesn't make a relationship negative or a bad experience. So I think, in conclusion, compromise is fine. I think this person's videos were way too many caveats, way too many different conversations kind of built into there that you have to lead up to and have until you can come with that final conclusion. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to have your own discussion in the comments, and I promise I won't disparage you or tell you missed the point.